Let's get one thing straight. If you love Star Wars and want to play a game that actually makes you feel like you're living in that universe, Outlaws is without question the game to purchase. But if you were hoping for something as beautiful on the inside as it is on the outside, I promise you'll be disappointed. No quest has narrative juice that is worth the squeeze. All characters feel like unseasoned calories. And the main protagonist, Kay, and her cat-like sidekick, Nix, feel like a vegan substitute for Han and Chewie. But before we get deeper into that, let's talk about what kept me playing Star Wars Outlaws for a lot longer than I expected. My name is Paul, this is Load and Behold, and the outrageously good-looking Star Wars universe Massive and Ubisoft have crafted here is truly remarkable. There's no debate. The environmental artists absolutely nailed it. Every street corner, bustling city market, and open grassy plain feels crafted with care. After a brief tutorial, our mainline quest takes us to Toshara, a mostly rural planet with a few smaller settlements scattered amongst vibrant meadows and deep orange rock faces. Eventually, we're driven to the only big city on this planet, Miragana, and in order to enter, we have to pass through an Imperial-controlled security checkpoint. It feels just like the movies, the first time we see Obi-Wan convince the enemy that these aren't the droids you're looking for. Here though, in Outlaws, we don't have Jedi powers, but Kay has the street smarts to get through without incident. The stormtroopers feel grounded due to the way their pristine armor shimmers in stark contrast to the otherwise dirt-laden city beyond. Miragana offers dense markets, tight city streets, and shops and alleyways dotted with familiar droids and alien species. Massive has managed a true feat here. Each part of the city feels unique and grimy, but also undeniably Star Wars, despite its absence from mainline canon. The immersion and quality of assets didn't stop here. Landing on Tatooine for the first time was absolutely surreal. I've seen this in the movies, but now I get to experience Luke Skywalker's stomping grounds, not through the eyes of a hero or a Jedi, but as a common thief trying to better her position in the galaxy. The smallness, then, of Kay's character is appealing to me, because there's no grand destiny awaiting her. In many ways, this is how Outlaws separates itself from the other big-budget Star Wars games of the past few years, by exploring the criminal underworld through the lens of the average person. But let's back up a minute. Before Tatooine was on the table, Kay was trying to escape her homeworld by robbing one of the richest men in the galaxy. Unfortunately, she fails, gets a death mark put on her, which is about as creative as it sounds, and even though she escapes on a borrowed ship, she crash lands on Toshara. An all-too-eager mechanic offering to fix her ship ends up double-crossing Kay, but ultimately Kay is rescued by the older brother of the man she tried to steal from, who is also seeking revenge against his family. Kay is recruited and assigned a new protector and crewmate, ND5, a duster-dotting droid with a smooth but strong voice. For a moment, I was ecstatic. Was Outlaws about to turn into a Mass Effect-style RPG, complete with companion quests and the ability to have your crew join you on away missions? Unfortunately, ND5 quickly boiled down to a cockpit ornament, and other than him occasionally reaching out to you over the radio, he barely leaves his seat, let alone the ship. But part of Kay's new focus is to recruit the best heist-faring crew the galaxy has ever seen. Surely the other companions would be different, right? The second crewmate I recruited, a small pig-like creature, had a fixation on explosives. Her comms were occasionally funny, I'll admit, but in reality, it continued to remind me of where the game falls short, the lack of a party system. There was even a unique quest to recruit Enk, but after that, we only hear her voice over the radio and see her likeness stuck to a workbench inside Kay's ship. This felt like a bait and switch and left me scratching my head. In my mind, Outlaws blew it. Massive and Ubisoft had a chance to make a once-in-a-generation Star Wars title. In the process, Ubisoft could have also restored a lot of credibility, asserting that they can move beyond the formulaic Assassin's Creed and Far Cry franchises they've been repackaging for decades. And honestly, many of Outlaws' transgressions would be forgiven if the story was something to write home about. Unfortunately, I can barely remember any of the characters' names, let alone their personality traits. Even Kay, our main protagonist, can be best described as inoffensive, and beyond some snarky comments, her defining characteristic is being tied to her pet companion, Nix. In gameplay then, Nix is there to fetch items for you, distract guards, and otherwise access places Kay simply can't go. As a result, Nix is more of a tool in the game, rather than a living creature. He can't speak, aside from the occasional growl, but he does have an undeniable cuteness. So when he was kidnapped and taken to Jabba the Hutt as a trophy, I was suddenly laser-focused on my mission. Naturally then, getting Nix back meant infiltrating Jabba's palace. Here, Kay continues to deploy familiar game mechanics, sneaking past guards who have a severe case of tunnel vision, and the extremely obvious and yellow-colored HVAC vents in the Hutt Palace didn't help. I feel like a broken record, but Outlaws dropped the ball yet again. They could have integrated an immersive sim-like system, seen in something like the latest Indiana Jones title. But instead, Ubisoft copy and pasted game design that feels like it goes back to the PS2 era. Every action from Kay makes her feel stiff and underdeveloped. To some degree, I get it. Outlaws has to appeal to a wide audience, and the difficulty has to be scalable along with that. With all that being said, finding Nix in the Hutt Palace dungeon did have a unique reward, confronting Jabba. Predictably though, Jabba has to entertain himself and uses his trapdoor to introduce Kay to his pet Rancor. And suddenly, we've moved from cutscene to boss fight. The aim here is to ignite explosive barrels moving across a conveyor system overhead in order to goad the Rancor into breaking through a giant metal door, theoretically creating an escape route for Kay and Nix. But the mechanics here felt paint by numbers, and most of the time, just frustrating. Beyond this, my encounter with Jabba highlighted one additional flaw. The world doesn't change based on your actions. Outlaws advertises a dynamic syndicate system where you can take contracts with various criminal gangs, mostly fetch quests if we're being honest, to improve your standing with them and earn rewards. By the time I was face to face with Jabba, I had built up a max reputation with the Hutts and was even outfitted with the unique gear that supposedly his gang provided me. Jabba is hardly friendly, but look at his relationship with Boba Fett. They scratch each other's backs, and that earns them some mutual favor with the other. I could argue the same thing about Kay at this moment in my playthrough. So when this wasn't even a footnote during our conversation, it makes the world here feel hollow, like my actions have no consequences. So by this time, I'd had enough. If Ubisoft and Massive didn't want to put any effort into their game mechanics and even try to have a persistent world, why should I continue to play it? Now, this is the part of the review where I say I persisted to the end, and honestly, I continued playing the game for a short time, but ultimately, I needed to cut my losses and move on. Outlaws continued to disappoint. Every amazing set piece was contrasted with overwhelming mediocrity. I think some will call me a quitter and say I'm selling the game short. After all, there's a few mechanics we haven't even discussed, like the interplanetary travel system via a ship you can customize and upgrade. There's also a speeder that helps you navigate the open worlds once you land. Bonus minigames like Sabacc and a bizarre but delightful food game that earns you upgrades for Nix are a fun distraction too. The music is also well executed, by blending elements of the familiar John Williams score with its own unique riffs. But none of this matters, because after you put the controller down, all you'll see is wasted potential. With all that being said though, playing Outlaws did give me the urge to go back and rewatch some of the movies. In many ways, the original trilogy resonates with me more because I had been to those places and seen them from a different perspective. It allowed me to appreciate a franchise I all but gave up on after the rise of Skywalker. Naturally then, in my movie rewatching, I skipped some of the entries, but eventually I found my way to The Force Awakens, the first of the 2010s Disney reboot trilogy. It's amazing how much that movie reminds me of Outlaws. The Force Awakens lays the groundwork for a new trilogy, for a series that had been gone from the silver screen for about a decade. It had some explaining to do, since the prequel trilogies, while very memeable, are largely forgettable. It's the feeling from the original trilogies that fans really crave. And generally speaking, for me as a viewer, The Force Awakens delivered by forging a new path for Star Wars while also layering a rather thick layer of nostalgia on top. At least for me, this movie reignited my passion back when it came out. But after the confusing Last Jedi and the quite honestly disastrous Rise of Skywalker film, many fans, including myself, had to part ways with this iconic universe. This roller coaster of emotion is the same feeling I get from Outlaws, and it's what kept me playing for just under 20 hours. It's not that I think Outlaws is a bad game, it's that it chooses to be mediocre. A squad system, immersive sim mechanics, and a more compelling story would propel Star Wars Outlaws as a game to be revered for generations. Maybe it's my fault for being lured in by the pretty scenery, but in reality, I'm going to blame the developers for lazy, simplistic, quality over quantity game design that hold Outlaws back from greatness. In my mind, Star Wars Outlaws is irredeemable. Only the most diehard Star Wars fans should consider picking this up, and even then, be prepared to be disappointed. With all that being said, what do you think? Have I been too harsh on Star Wars Outlaws? Let me know in the comments below. And with that, see you in the next video.